Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for February 23rd, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher moderating. Also here are Ralph Kohler, who's sharing his screen, and we'll start off the discussion. Aaron McHale, Simo Helston, and Scott. Go ahead, Ralph.
The first issue we are looking at is number 3420356, add link to update module documentation about installer settings. It's basically, I just demonstrate quickly in the installer. Let's go through it, standard. It is basically adding a link to documentations page. As far as I understood, there is no change to the wording itself. And yeah, if you go there, you're forwarded to the documentation page where most of the changes got added. Any questions?
Yes. So I guess there's a long-standing issue to have increased to collect more information about how users are using enabling core modules and such. And this is not that, or is it?
No.
This is just about notifying users about the way it already works, about the information collected by the updates module.
Yep. And about the functioning behind those checkboxes that is basically explained on that documentations page now. What is actually happening behind the scenes there.
And can you go back to your site? So
yeah.
So this is when this is after the site is installed. Or is this the right? So it's after the site is installed and when you're running the update module. And this is the page for the update module. And that section didn't used to be there at all, did it? The update notification section?
It was there.
Really? Okay.
It was just the link that is added there.
Okay. And I see that Thomas Howell has just joined us. And Thomas, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm trying to paste in the link for the issue, but I pasted in the wrong thing. Just give me a second. Does anyone else have questions or clarification at this point? Oh, and Christina Chunias has just joined us too. Welcome. So I guess I never update through the admin UI, so I guess I'm just not very familiar with this page. But
well, this is of course like the basic Drupal install. So this would be an install that basically a developer would see most of the time. Nobody in administration would.
Yeah. I think this is a nice, like very small change, but I think it's really nice because, like, it can be like I sometimes get confused by those two checkboxes. So receive email notification and check for updates, because I get notifications from security updates or something like that. So it's kind of so that there is link to information that like explains what those are. So
if I was to knit, the knit would be that the expression should be above receive email notifications, not below them both. The issue points out the fact that the receive email notifications actually adds your emails to the list, but it doesn't specify that in this ticket request that we do something about that message. But I think moving the message up between them makes more sense, because as soon as it's right, the second one is dynamic and it's still about the top issue. We're not adding in a notice about, like on the ticket, it says, you know, this adds the user's email address above to this other setting. We're not explaining that here, but the ticket doesn't actually say that, of course.
I saw a thumbs up from Ralph, and I also think you're right. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. So I was under the impression that like when you the receiving email notifications was the site itself sending email notifications. So is that not the case? Is it actually sending your email off to like Drupal.org email address and then that you're added to a list that way?
That's a good question. I don't know this answer either. I would assume that it just means that when you're, yeah, that's a good question. I have no idea what that actually does.
Because the number of times I've put in a at example.com email address, I mean, I hope that's not being sent to Drupal.org.
Well, example.com is a regulated site for a different reason, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, no, we don't understand that. I guess that's the thing. This ticket isn't saying we need to do that, but it is the same point that it's adding the email address to system notifications, but who sends that? That's a cron item. I'm going to guess that being a cron item. And
I'm pretty sure this is emails coming from your own site to you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe that should be clarified here. Configuring email notifications, the role of the admin user's email.
See, okay, so the problem with this is that we have a link on a Drupal install page that makes people go to a website when they may not actually be online installing it. That could be a problem as that goes.
Personally, I think that's a pretty low probability event.
Just a point.
Okay. I had a very small complaint about it, which is that the sentence is written in the passive voice. Anonymous information is sent to. It's not a particularly bad example of the passive voice, in my opinion. But I guess the question is, who is the subject of the sentence? Who is doing the sending or what? And should we make that clearer?
Is it not possible to make it say something more clear, like module status information is being sent to Drupal.org? Because we know what information, it's not anonymous information, it's module status information.
Yeah, and the sender would be the site.
Yeah. So we say what it is, like we say that it's your module, your enabled modules and the versions that they're running is the information that is being sent to Drupal. Because that's the only information that's being sent otherwise, right? As far as I understand.
I believe so. I think this is the information that gets collected to show usage data for contrib modules.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should be clear about the information that's being collected and sent, if only from a data protection perspective. I would like. Sorry, go ahead.
I just did an installation with the current version of Drupal, and the sentence is already there, and it's already in the passive voice, and really the only thing being added here is that checking for updates is plain text on my copy of the site, and it's turned into a link here.
Okay. Okay.
So I would suggest that the things we're complaining about, the position of this help text and the passive voice, are valid follow-up issues, but we should not consider them as blockers for the current issue.
Okay. Yeah, there's scope of it.
Benji, does that Drupal.org link also appear in a core, like a standard site?
Yes, and it just goes to the
Okay.
homepage.
Okay.
Oh.
Because the thing I was going to say is that the checking for updates link, the way it is right now, is not ideal. So when we provide links, it should be really clear where the link is going. And so, and also like I would prefer if we avoided like inline links in general. So because for instance, if you're using a screen reader or any kind of assistive technology and you're just tabbing through the links on the page, a link that just says checking for updates is completely useless. Because the link text provides no context as to what that link is actually going to a documentation page. So the link text needs to be clear about where it's going and what the expectation is. So we should have a link separate to the sentence probably that says like something like for like something to mention like documentation about updates or how what you actually get when you get there. So like if it's information about what information is sent to Drupal.org, we should say, read more about information that's sent as part of the update process or something like that.
That's a good point. Checking for updates is not the best link text for that link. Ralph?
One other minor nitpick in regards of the documentation is on the install page, you have site maintenance account, while over here it's called site administrator's email, and administrator isn't mentioned over here directly. And at least myself, I tend to, if I'm uncertain in an area and I'm new to something, I just try to find the exact wording and to see if I'm correct. And you have two email addresses on here. Okay, it's site email address, so probably the assumption is right that the following email address down here is used, but still to use the identical attribution might be an idea or a suggestion from my end.
That's also a good point. So first things we noticed are out of scope, but valid follow-up issues. But using link text that describes more clearly where you're going, that's valid for this issue. Is there any other text there that we could use as the link text, or should we really use a separate sentence for that?
I would recommend
No.
a separate sentence.
Yeah, none of the text mentions documentation, so only one would be that Drupal.org that tells that it's going to someplace else, but it doesn't mention documentation.
Yeah, and why is Drupal.org a link? If it's just going to the homepage, that's not really a very helpful link, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, but that was standing. That's the thing. We're knitting about things that were standing.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like I think if that's you could say that as in scope in the sense that like you could say we're like improving the sentence and making it more useful. If that's like the scope of the issue, then technically removing that link and restructuring the sentence to add another link could be in scope.
And it's always a good question. How are we not allowed to change scope while we're having a conversation about it?
We could always create follow-up.
Well, no, okay.
issues.
So the ticket, of course, says add a link just to the update page. It doesn't say that we can't improve the sentence so that it meets, so the sentence reads better and meets accessibility. That's something we can do. We can't necessarily drop the .org. That is extending, right? Like that's the piece that's out by that in that respect. But no, it has no use. I don't see the point to it. You know, you're installing Drupal, you know where you got, how you got there.
Well, that's some indication of where that anonymous information is going to show up. It's not a very specific
Well, no,
description.
if it gave a link to a status page so you could see how this was being used, like if this linked to Drupal.org's release page, and so you could see the actual stats for Drupal, that would be impressive. But if it just goes to Drupal's front page and whip-de-doo-dah, you're on Drupal. But then you see how it's actually used.
Right.
Yeah, a common practice would be like linking to a privacy statement or something, which do we have a privacy statement for this information? Maybe that's what we're trying to address here, I'm not sure.
I also think that having two links is sometimes worse than having one link, because then people don't know which link to click on. So maybe if we're adding a link, we should remove the old one.
Agree.
And I guess we often leave it up to the people working on the issue. For instance, we could suggest that the help text belongs below the first checkbox and leave it up to people working on the issue. If that's an easy thing to do as part of the same issue, they can do it as part of the same issue, expanding the scope, or they can choose to make it a follow-up issue.
That sounds fair.
So is it worth considering rewriting the sentence to indicate that your site is sending information to get rid of the passive voice, or is that just grammatical nitpicking?
No, I think the sentence is too vague in general. It should be more present about what the information is. It's not anonymous information. Define what the information is because we know what it is. That would be the other.
Yeah, it's a general principle that you should describe things by what they are rather than by what they're not. So saying that the information is anonymous is saying what it's not. It's not going to send any personally identifiable information. It's not going to send any passwords, so on.
Yeah, it's not sending user information at all, client information.
And that is important. It's as Aaron points out, a privacy concern, but it's also a negative. So I guess we should try to describe what information is being sent. Do we know exactly what information is being sent? Is it just the information about which Kindred modules are installed?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, it's your installed modules and the versions that they are. That's the only information I can actually confirm.
And does the documentation even say that you can change these settings after installation?
Post the link also in the chat.
No, I don't see anything that talks about disabling.
No.
It says that it updates it's the update manager module. Is that the same actual same you were talking about the name? Is it actually called the same thing? That's a good question.
I'm sorry, didn't quite follow that question.
Sorry, he was talking about the fact that then it's called one thing there, but is it actually called the update manager module in Drupal? It's called update. Update manager. Okay, now it's
I
called
think,
update.
yeah, that's.
So the machine name is update, but the label or the kind of the human readable name is update manager.
Oh. My really wide complaint at this point would be that the update manager, the check for updates actually says check for updates. It doesn't say enable update manager. And then underneath of it, give a description that that is what that actually is when you're updating it and enabling it on this page. Checkbox should say enable update manager, and it should have a description under it that says that will be sending anonymous or sending module version information back. That would actually simplify the entire problem. So the sentence becomes a checkbox description.
I suppose for someone who's never installed Drupal before, this is the first time they've done it. The terminology of modules might be unfamiliar.
Yeah, I think check for updates automatically is probably more useful in that case because like it's describing the action that will happen. Like the user at this point almost doesn't care the fact it's a module or a subsystem or whatever terminology we use to describe that.
Mhm. We're overthinking.
Well, that's what we do. Um,
So this meets the criteria, but the criteria just need some more points to be thought about, I think, and more maybe follow-up issues around it. That would be what we're talking about. Work meets the criteria, but the criteria may need wider adjustment.
So let's see, on the documentation page, it says when setting up a new Drupal site, the installation process offers options to configure the update manager module for immediate use. Da, 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 da. So I guess what I'm looking for is an explicit statement that you can change that configuration after installation. And that's not really explicit here. So I've been taking notes, and I have a list of suggestions. And I'll post into the chat the notes I've made. Did I leave anything out? How the email is addressed in the docs. What do you mean by that, Ralph?
The detail I've mentioned before, you have 2 emails on that installation page, and to use the same terminology used over here, site maintenance account's email address instead of site administrator's account, which is currently used. And just trying to be consistent with the label.
Right, that's what I meant by my second to last point.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next issue?
Yeah, the only question is who volunteers to post a comment. Okay, I can do it. And before we go on, Christina and Thomas, I think, joined the meeting a little after we started. Do either of you have issues you'd like to bring up?
Towards the end, I'd like to talk about our meeting earlier this week that Ralph and I attended, but I'd like us to go through all of the normal meeting stuff first.
Okay. Aaron?
Yes, I was going to highlight it in the chat. I posted additional kind of suggestion about link text with an example, so feel free to use that.
Thanks. Okay. Well, Ralph, why don't you decide which of the other 2 issues you'd like to bring up?
I think maybe we take a look at the issue number 3184588, make disabled status more obvious in a view, where Scott actively worked on. And so he has the most insight there, and I've also commented on the issue as well.
Okay.
I'll check over here. Basically, go one step. If you go onto a disabled view, then the issue adds basically a note that this view is disabled, and also adds a grayish background color compared. 1 second, go one step underneath. Over here, you have a white background, and here you have a gray background. Those are the main changes.
I don't see the change in background color over Zoom. Do other people see the difference? Okay, I I'll trust you that it's there, but it just doesn't come through on Zoom.
Yep.
Oh,
Oh,
it did.
yeah, I
played
see it.
the work, of course,
Oh.
but
Okay.
It's like the wrapper around the view
Yeah.
area becomes gray rather than the whole page itself.
Okay.
Any questions?
Fine. I'm just looking at a page. On the local copy. Right, there's no indication. You have the usual Dropbox to edit the view name or description, which oddly does not include the option to enable it. Yeah, so why why give them a link to the page where they can enable it instead of adding the enabling option to the drop button just above this message? In fact, I would think that enabling should be the first option in that drop button. I am not hearing a chorus of Benji, you're right, so maybe not everyone agrees with
I
me.
think you're right. I think you're right on that, right?
Oh, good.
Benji, you are right. All hail Benji.
That's better. A thumbs
So
up would have been adequate.
I had suggested that to her, or I'm not actually sure if it's her. I'm sorry. Because that's why the sub issue was made, because I brought it up to her that like we're just kind of adding a label on, and that's fine to add the label on. I wasn't sure if the complexity of adding on that to the main item would be too complex. I just hadn't looked into that, but to give them the suggestion to open up the second ticket. What is the process for like saying, hey, no, like the other ticket is actually better to proceed with anyway? How do you say, what is there a process to close this ticket and say, no, the other ticket is actually a better idea to proceed with?
So you can certainly leave a comment, and if people agree with that, or frankly, if you're sure enough of yourself that you do it, you can close one issue as a duplicate and link to the other issue.
And that's a normal process then? Like that's a more comfortable process for saying, hey, like let's go with the other issue.
Yeah, I think you prefer to get consensus before doing that most of the time. Ralph, go ahead.
I think adding the option to enable a disabled view on the disabled view page is definitely a good thing, but at the same time, having such a label like it is introduced in this issue here is also a good thing. I think they go along, and it would be good to have both of them from my perspective.
So disabled displays does that. If you go down and disable the display, it already just puts up a simple little message on top, even though you're on the display that's disabled and the button is already there. So they already double down on it. Like, so go up to this and disable the display you're on. Lower one, the second, the duplicate.
There you mean, okay.
Just disable this one. Disable page. bottom.
Bottom option.
I was blind. Sorry.
Yeah. So see there, it just popped up a little message that says this display is disabled, which is great for each individual display. And then this function ghosts out the display below it. So did you notice that? So our background is gray because of this new work, but this if an individual display is disabled, it ghosts it, and that's standing functionality. But you can still click on everything. It just makes it look transparent. I don't know what the purpose of that is, of course. You can still edit everything on it.
Well, I think the purpose is the same as the gray background. It's a visual indication that the display is disabled. I'm sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Okay, I have a few thoughts now. The first one is, given what we're looking at, and obviously this is out of scope for this issue, but I would strongly recommend that we not ghost the display when it's disabled, especially if you can interact with it like that.
Standing functionality.
Sorry, say again?
That already happens in Drupal. This issue doesn't add that in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I know that's out of scope for this issue. What I'm saying is, like, I think seeing that here, we definitely shouldn't do that. Like, that's maybe, there's maybe a separate issue could be, we could look at opening to say, actually, let's change that behavior, because that's not great, accessibility wise, especially if you're going to interact with the elements there. Yeah, what was I going to say? So in general, though, in terms of what this issue is trying to do, I think I would like to see a more of like a general pattern, because in Drupal there's other things that you can disable, like I'm thinking like other config entities. I'm trying to think of, like, I don't know. If they're I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe blocks is, I don't know. But like I would like to see a consistent pattern for how things are disabled, because if you the same behavior when you disable a view, if you can disable something somewhere else, should be used. So like the same messaging, the same kind of approach. So if there is other places, then we should look to do the same there. And yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm not sure, like, I would question the adding the views overview link. I'm just not sure that's helpful. Like, if there was a link there that just enabled it, because the thing is there, if you want to enable it, like, rather than, I think, Benji, did you say this earlier? Like, just provide a link that enables the view, perhaps. But again, I'd like to see that applied more generally rather than just specific to views.
Yeah, I did suggest adding the enable link to the top right drop button. Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Ralph, did you also want to say something?
I was still raising my hand, but yeah, I would have basically. One in particular, I wasn't aware that it's possible to disable a display, and then I think the position for that this view is disabled, admin notice, I was before that already skeptical, but I still think the correct position in regards of hierarchy would be between the secondary tabs over here, the tabs over up here and the displays, because it's that admin notice is about all displays in the entire view, and having it underneath, it looks like it's the context for page at the moment, even though the text communicates something different.
Yes.
And one other small detail is something I've already posted on the issue. The page title should also reflect that view. At the moment, it's just glossary and the site's name, but it should be apply that front-loaded pattern we've discussed several times. First, the name, the most important information of that view you're looking at, and then basically disabled view or something like that, so that a screen reader user when visiting a page already has the entire context, because down here, there's the possibility that that node might go unnoticed.
So I'm sorry, you're saying that the current title has the name of the view and the site?
Yeah, it's at the moment, if you take a look, oops,
I think content is the entity type of this view.
at the moment you have
Oh, you mean the actual title tag,
yeah,
not the H1 on the page.
no, the page title, the actual page title. Glossary content, Drupal 11 is the current title. And I would suggest to add the detail that it's an disabled view there as well.
I see. As a visual user, I only notice page titles when they're in tabs, and like many people, I have way too many tabs open at each time, so I usually don't see them at all. I'm sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
I just forgot to lower my hand.
Okay.
Sorry, you just meant the H1 tag, not the HTML title tag, correct? Sorry.
No, I meant the page, the title in head.
The
I
title
refer
tag.
to the title tag in head. So basically that you get, oops, something like disabled view. It's just an arbitrary example. Change it to something like that, that it's directly clear. And if you visit with a screen reader, you directly get glossary content, disabled view, Drupal 11, and in voiceover, a few stats afterwards.
Oh, and a few minutes ago, Simo mentioned in the chat, the ghost effect even uses two different shades of gray. The third column is lighter. So I would suggest that as a matter of managing scope and, not trying not to be a bully, and trying to encourage small changes, that we go ahead and use the message as it currently is with the link to the views overview page. And as a follow-up issue, add the enable option to the drop button. And as part of that follow-up issue, remove the link to the views overview page, because at that point you'll have an easier way to enable it. As part of this issue, I think Ralph has a good point that the position of the message is just wrong. It's along with all the information for the current display rather than for the view. So it should go in the same area as the regular messages area where it says currently you have unread changes. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually suggesting that instead of a views overview link, like if it's possible to just have a link that allows you to enable the view. Because that way it's like, one less step. And then that way also the link is still relevant.
So you want to put the enable link directly in this message?
I'm suggesting it would be a better idea than linking to the views overview page if possible, but also like I still like your idea about making the enable link the top item in the drop button. So I think both are valid. I think it's just if there's a better link we can provide, like a more actionable link, I think that's better than the views overview page. Otherwise, if not, because I don't know, maybe it's like it makes a post request or something. But if it's possible to have a link that just enables it, then that might be a better option than going to views overview.
Ralph, what happens when you click on the disable and then the enable link for the display?
Ajax action. But nothing you can see, nothing till you save the page. So the
Okay.
top, so what we don't see right now is you have unsaved changes at the top. But of course, if you're a congruent editor, another person comes to this view and sees it, that top link changes to the break this lock.
Huh.
So one of the reasons we moved it into it was that you'd have both messages always, basically. You always have a message that says this disables disabled. But the unsaved changes block is actually a JavaScript action that gets hidden and saved. So it's always on the page.
Okay. I didn't even realize that was core functionality. I thought
Yeah, I actually
blocking-
describe it in the ticket below that like that's actually what we sort of described is we moved it in because it was I thought it was just bloating more of the top space there because we can't change those two messages. They work too dynamically. The break lock function works where you have has a link in it, but that's probably more complex than adding it into the drop button as a piece of featureism, and it's getting more complex featureism because you're creating more confirm forms, I think, in that circumstance. My only other complaint, the only thing that I thought, like even because I did it, my complaint was that the background that they chose was this gray color. I was trying to figure out why, or even if you guys might bring up the color of why not use like something like the unpublished pink in the background, because then it's much more clear right off the bat that there's something about the view that's disabled, not just the background color, which is what they had already chosen.
And to Aaron's point that we should try to be consistent, I think that using the same pink that we use for unpublished nodes is probably a good idea. Aaron, is your hand still up or again up? I think it's still up.
No, I think it's sorry.
Okay, so Scott, could you say again what are the things that technically we can't do here?
There will be two sets of messages on the top. We can't remove, there's always the you have unsaved changes block. That block is always there and hidden by JavaScript. And if you have a concurrent editor, then you have the lock break. That's when it changes to a lock break.
Okay, so is that not the standard messages area for?
Yes, it is. But there's two set. We were talking about trying to combine the message at one point, so that it would just be like 2 points. You have unsaved changes, and this view is disabled. That was one of the things we sort of talked about. That way, there would be two strict black blocks at the top of the page.
Okay, so those two are complicated, but we could add a second message to the messages area, couldn't we?
No, because the one message is always there and hidden by JavaScript. It gets hidden and shown.
And it's the messages area that gets hidden, not the individual message.
Yeah. It's not a real message area. This is what we're looking at is just part of the actual same form. So it's a pseudo message status wrapper inside of a form element, but it's not actually a status page message. It's not a Drupal message.
Oh.
Okay, it's hidden in the form. It's a block that looks like something in a form.
Okay, so it's not the standard message page.
Yeah, the message is still on top of everything else here. That message on top is part of the form. So it's easy enough to move on top of both sets, but both sets have to remain. They can't be combined in.
Okay, could.
I think that's kind of okay. I mean, we don't really have a specific pattern for you have unsaved changes for that message, because like what that message is trying to do is make it really clear to the user, like something, you did something on the page. Hey, this isn't, you haven't saved this yet.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
And I think the more visually distinct and the more obvious that is, the better. So the fact that that is, would be its own separate message area is not necessarily a bad thing. So even if so I would still support moving this view is disabled message higher up, even if it's a separate message box, because I think, as Ralph said, it's a better fit there from a hierarchy perspective.
I'm okay with it too. I thought it was a little cluttered, but if others feel it's good, then it's good too. Until somebody wants to do a wider UX review, because you get into the ghosting the page and changing the colors of the page is a lot of funny stuff on top of it, right? Especially when you can just click on stuff and edit it and change it anyway.
Right.
But it does accomplish the job of helping people to understand that a view has been disabled, and that's why, the original report was like, we came to this view and it was disabled and it wasn't clear. So at least it does that, right? Unless the other ticket to edit it in is actually something that's simple enough to do quickly. I just don't know offhand.
Okay, we have less than 10 minutes to go and a few people have their hands raised. Thomas, can you go first?
I just wanted to say that I needed a few minutes to talk about the meeting on Monday. So if we can wrap this up, that'd be great.
Okay, and Ralph?
Just one brief comment and idea. At the moment, this view is disabled admin notice is labeled as a warning in yellow, but would it make sense to make it just an info in green? And that way it would also distinguish between those unsafe changes, which become context sensitive if some changes happen, but the view is disabled as a general notice, and that way it's informational. And no exception, so just a thought.
Getting a thumbs up from Simo. Yeah, I agree it should be info. Anyone else? Thumbs up from Aaron. Okay, I think we have consensus on that point. But let me briefly run through some of the suggestions we've got. So the point I brought up at the start that we should add it to the drop list. I think we already have consensus on that. I just pasted my notes into the chat. Although it could be a follow-up. Do we agree on the second follow-up that that the way we indicate a disabled view should be consistent with the way we indicate a disabled display? That there should be a message and consistent visual indication, whether it be the background or the ghosting, that it should at least be consistent. Get thumbs up from Aaron. Anyone disagree? All right, so not broad consensus, but no objections to that. Yeah, Ralph says gives a +1 for consistency. I was separating out ghosting as a separate point. So the position of the message, Scott points out that there are technical problems here, but that's not our concern. Our concern is usability, and we would like the position to be above the displays section. I think we have agreement on that. And I get some thumbs up that the position of the message should be higher on the page. Yes, thank you. Ralph suggested that we update the title tag for the page and mention there that the view is disabled. I don't feel strongly about that. Other opinions? Thumbs up from Ralph. And I guess no one else feels strongly. So we don't have consensus there, but it's a suggestion. Sort of as an intermediate stage to get this issue through before we add it to the drop list to change the link to the views overview page, add an immediate enable link. Do we have consensus on that point, on that suggestion? Thumbs up from Aaron, I agree. Thumbs up from Simo. Okay, that's not a strong consensus, but a consensus. Get a thumbs up from Ralph also. Scott's suggestion that we use the same color, the pink that unpublished nodes use. I think that's a good idea. Anyone else? Thumbs up from Ralph and Aaron, and Simo. Okay. And from Thomas. And I think we already agreed on that last point, that it should be an info rather than warning message.
I'll just say that I don't know if pink is necessarily better, but it's consistent, and
Yes.
I'm all for that. So
Okay. And who wants to add a comment to this issue? And Ralph volunteers in the chat. And Scott gives another +1 for consistency and then suggests pink everywhere, which perhaps is a joke. Okay, we have just 1 minute left. So go ahead, Thomas. What do you want to
Okay.
say?
So really briefly, so that this is for everyone's visibility, we continue to follow up on an issue that came up during some card sorting exercise that Christina ran quite a while ago, where I had observed an issue with Drupalisms and basically definitions, those types of things. The issue's morphed into something a little bit more regular in terms of discussions. We're meeting every 2 weeks. And really, this is still part of it's like a sub-team of what we do here in the UX group. But more importantly, we recently have come to the conclusion that to do better information gathering on like what are existing Drupalisms, we wanted to tackle creating a controlled vocabulary for Drupal. And as part of that, we need to do some more like outreach and get visibility going. And so I guess sort of Ralph were tasked along with Aaron of bringing to everyone in this group that we're hoping to put together some sort of I don't know, test is the wrong word, but we want to do something that can be released at DrupalCon or by DrupalCon so that we can try and get the most people involved possible in getting opinions about Drupalisms, because it's a chicken and the egg scenario, and it's a really long, outstanding issue. And we need like active feedback and opinions from people as to whether or not this would work. Should we be reaching through different social media forums? Like, how should we be getting visibility up? Because we need to get as much traction, because related to this issue, there's a lot of pent up tension around things like, I'm going to use a controversial example, but Node. There are people who hate the word Node and don't want Node being used anymore. The point of what we're working on is not to necessarily suggest that Node has to be changed to fancy pants. We're not advocating for any type of solution. We're trying to make certain we have a controlled vocabulary so we at least know what Node is, so that we can have discussions about this and it can launch other initiatives. So we're discussing the possibility of, should this be an initiative to discuss Drupalisms? We're being very soft right now because we don't want to make any firm commitments, but because this spawned from this group, we really want to make certain we're bringing it back to the UX team and the UX call first. And so hopefully maybe next week we can talk about this more. It won't be till the Monday after that we meet again. And if anyone's interested in coming to those Monday meetings, please let us know. We'd love to involve you. Or if you're just interested in contributing to these lists of Drupalisms, we've got documentation we're working on. So thank you very much. Ralph or Aaron, do you have anything you'd like to add?
You covered it very well. Thanks, Thomas. I just like to thank, I know Emma's not here, but she's also put a lot of work into this, and she did it with myself round above at DrupalCon, but yeah, Emma's done a lot of work on this area, so as well.
Oh, that reminds me of the other key point. We are looking for one or more volunteers who will be at DrupalCon to help us carry this banner, because for certain, Emma, Aaron, and Ralph are not going to be at DrupalCon Portland. The odds are heavily against me because I'm currently a student, and so getting out there is pretty unlikely. So I don't know if Christina would be interested. I don't know if you, Benji, would be interested, or if Simo or anyone else, Scott, anyone who isn't here today. So reach out and we'll talk about it more next week if there's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks all for coming. Sorry we ran a few minutes late. See you next week.
Thanks, Benji. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Everyone, have a nice weekend.
You too. Bye.